Good morning, Swugga friends. About a week ago, CG released a new update to the game that gave us some new Cantina farms in Sector 9, and I set up an experiment through Google Sheets to allow us to figure out the drop rates and the best course of action for players for their Cantina energy in order to get their signal data. And through Discord and through Reddit and through other content creators sharing this sheet, we have had a ton of interest in people wanting to contribute data. I think that there are 14 sheets of data right now, which is super, super awesome. However, it is still preliminary. What we are doing today is looking at the preliminary result just because tomorrow is triple drops and it is going to take us weeks to really get a full picture of what is going on. So during that time period, I want people to have guidance on where they should be putting their Cantina energy. Before we hit that, if you find this type of content helpful, hitting subscribe does let me know to continue with my math work. But with that said, let's get started. All right, we have our new Cantina battles. We see Sector 8 is what we are used to farming on. Still 16 energy. Pretty much everything the same about the drop rates, except that now Omicrons are not in Sector 8, and instead we have Zetas. Now, Omicrons used to drop at a 0.5% drop rate per battle, not per energy spent. These Zetas drop at a 1% drop rate, which is double, and that is going to be meaningful and helpful to people and players in the mid game to early game. Sector 9 has a Cantina energy increase to 20 energy, which is where people are getting iffy on what the best way to do things is. And while the Omicrons are back, their drop rate has been increased to 0.75. So we should see the Omicron inflow be relatively consistent for most players if you are on the Sector 9 nodes. What has people tripped up is because of this increase in Cantina energy and because the drop rates are different here for these signal data, players are not sure. Do I go to Sector 8? Do I go to Sector 9? And again, we are talking preliminary data, so I don't have an exact answer, but I can at least offer you guidance over the next couple of weeks to help you out a little. So let's kind of get started. Let's take a look at what these data sheets look like right over here. This is the data sheet that is public to all of the players out there in Swugga land. You can see that we do have a pretty decent amount of data on node 9F, which is the blue-green data node, almost 5,000 data points. For 9D and 9B, we're only looking at about 400 data points per node, and a lot of that is me begging other players to please hit these nodes so that we can get more of a drop rate. Now, unfortunately, because double and triple drops have hit at this literal exact time, we have paused this experiment right now because while I do trust a lot of you to collect data correctly during double and triple drops, I know that there are a lot of players out there that just do not think about things in the same way that I think about things. And properly inputting data during this time is a little bit more confusing because there is an extra step. So to make sure that we didn't corrupt our data, we have paused the experiment for the next couple of days. Players who do want to contribute data during this time can send me screenshots on Discord. I will add it to my own area up here and normalize it for regular drops. Please, again, consider hitting 9B and 9D so that we can have more of a consistent picture on those nodes. Now, this is the private, public facing data sheet that we have, but I also have a private data sheet where I have run a little bit of an experiment. I call it the 10,000 Cantina Energy Experiment because it basically simulates 10,000 Cantina Energy being run for a player and showing what their drops would look like. What I do want to make clear, because we have not seen a lot of drops on the old nodes right now, in order for me to have the most reliable, up to date um, drop rates on the old nodes, is we are using the Planet Coruscant approved drop rates from years and years and years ago. I was not part of that experiment, but these drop rates are pretty equal to the numbers that I use. I would do 131% drop rate for gray, 92% for green, and 65% for blue. After playing with these numbers, this kind of makes sense where they are at because the crystal value remains relatively consistent here. But also going back between my numbers and their numbers, the shift is not very large at all. So we're going to use the numbers that they've put together as these the the amount of data, the data points was very large here. And what I want us to take a look at is running that 10,000 energy experiment, what we're going to get in terms of crystal value, and how everything looks comparative to your need for signal data as well as your need for corrupted signal data. So let's take that down, and we're going to pop this handy little infographic up that kind of explains things a little bit in a nicer format. Basically, with Cantina Sector 8, you are going to get about 12,375 crystals worth of value from that 10,000 energy over 625 battles, right? So 825 gray signal data, or 619 green signal data, or 413 blue signal data. That is how things have always been. You are also going to get 6.25 zeta material, or roughly 625 crystals worth of zeta material, because we've recently downgraded the cost on those things. That is not bad at all. But when we look at Cantina Sector 9, while we're only getting 500 battles worth because of the increased cost, we are getting a higher overall crystal value from every one of those nodes. Interestingly enough, right now, and this is subject to change because this is preliminary data, the highest technical crystal value node is 9B, which nobody wants to hit, with a 15,544 crystal value. And the lowest is 9F with a 13,619 crystal value. Now, the reason why that is happening here is because the gray signal data has a roughly 130% drop rate, or a 1.3 drop rate, and the green and the blue look to be somewhere around 60-40 on 9F. So while the value of those materials is overall higher, you are getting a lot more of the gray. And players are going to say, well, Egnards, I'm just going to hit 9F then because it makes more sense to me. Fine. But when we go back and we look at the corrupted signal data value, and we come on over here and we drop down, and we will zoom this in because this is not on the infographic, we see that on those old nodes, the 8 gray node, you get about 34 servo motors per 10,000 energy. On the green node, we get 34.14 per 10,000 energy. On the blue node, we actually get 28.45. And I've talked about this phenomenon in the past in earlier videos, where we talked about never using the blue signal data in order to get servo motors, because it is not as efficient, even though you get more points per blue signal data. But now when we look at 9B, 9D, and 9F, we are seeing the same thing. 9F is nowhere near as effective at getting you servo motors as 9B is. There's a huge swing where 9B is 42.88 servo motors per 10,000 energy, and 9F is 34.36 servo motors per 10,000 energy. So, what this really and effectively means for most players when we want to think about what you should be farming, I think it basically boils down to this. If you are an early game or a mid game player, you are probably still farming Cantina Sector 8 because you are in a huge Zeta deficit. Now, that might change in the near future with Omega battles now having Zetas, but I know that that deficit really goes very heavy. You're still going to want to have a consistent Zeta income. If you are a player that is a little bit further on in the game, the way that I see things essentially breaks down to this. If you have a short term project, so we're talking about like, oh, I'm going to have GL Hondo in a week and I need 100 more blue signal data to get him to Relic 9 so that I'm ready for the Smugglers Run 3 event. You're going to hit Cantina Sector 8 because you have a short term goal that is targeted, and you are going to more quickly get the one signal data that you need. That makes sense. But if you are doing more general farming, you probably are low on everything can signal data wise, but you need everything as well. You are probably going to hit Cantina Sector 9, not just because of the signal data, but also because you're going to need those Omicrons. And on that 10,000 energy used, you're going to get about 3.75 Omicrons, so roughly 4 Omicron materials, which are always in short supply as well. You're going to hit 9B, 9D, and 9F, and you're probably going to hit 9F if your need for signal data is for relicking, because gray signal data is pretty easy to get. Otherwise, there are other sources of that gray signal data between the guild store. I think it's the guild event store. Between the episode pass, that gray signal data does kind of stack up a little bit over time. 9F is going to give you both of the signal datas that you generally need. But if your goal is Relic 10, if your focus is Relic 10 and getting as many Relic 10s as possible and getting your corrupted signal data, I kept saying servo motors before, but I meant corrupted signal datas. If your goal is corrupted signal data, you're probably going to want to hit 9B, right? Because 9B is going to give you the highest conversion of signal data to corrupted signal data. That's where you want to be. Ironically, the node that right now nobody wants to hit. And I know you're thinking, hey, Egnards, well, I don't need Relic 10 right now. There's only so many characters. And I get that. I fully understand it. But one thing that we do want to keep in mind is that CG has basically said that in this next New Republic era, we are going to be seeing a much higher inflow of era currency, allowing players to get their servo motors from the era a lot quicker than they were before. And we are starting to see players hitting the area where they are pretty comfortable in their rosters and mitigating Relic Delta on the lower end. So I do believe that in this next era and the era that is going to follow it, that we are going to see a higher conversion of players jumping on that Relic 10 bandwagon and making sure that they have their key characters at that level. So again, 9B as of right now is a great node for that. What that means for me as a player is that tomorrow going into triple drops, I am personally going to be hitting 9B because I need corrupted signal data more than I need anything else. If you are near the end game, you are probably hitting 9F. And if you are in the mid game, you are probably hitting Cantina Sector 8. Oh, man. Finally, I want to remind everybody that again, these are preliminary results. We are only a couple of days into this experiment. I honestly would not have made this video or put together this infographic if it wasn't for the fact that people are already starting to talk about this data. And I've noticed that a lot of that information has been lacking the depth that I really like to put into the data that I put together. And because of triple drops, I wanted to give people guidance. We will look over the next couple of weeks again, probably in a month, maybe 2 months, when we have things a little bit more locked down so that we understand exactly what this looks like. And I will release another infographic. I'm not sure if we'll do another video. Depends on if that makes sense. To find those infographics, you can find me on our Slice of Otagunga Discord, where I will always post that information for people like myself who are allergic to video content. With all of that said, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope that your double drop day, your triple drop day kick ass. Peace out and have a great rest of the day.